Good afternoon. Welcome to INSA's Fireside Chat on the implementation of the IC's commercial space strategy. Please welcome INSA's Vice President, John Doyen.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. We have some terrific speakers here today ready to discuss the IC's implementation of commercial GEOINT, the challenges, opportunities, and importantly, the road ahead. They will discuss progress to date on NGA's prioritization of commercial GEOINT sources, the status of acquisition and integration at both NGA and NRO, challenges with vetting and integrating commercial GEOINT into existing agency models, and more. Plus, there will be time for audience Q&A. Before we begin, let me make a couple of housekeeping notes. If you have questions, and we hope you do, please submit them through the question box on the right side of your screen. Our moderator will do her best to get to your questions. We're pleased to welcome members of the press to the call today. This is a reminder, this event is on the record. In addition, we'll be posting the program recording on our website early next week. And finally, I'd like to thank our sponsors, BAE Systems, Maxar, SIM Software, and Vintel for their critical support of this program. We simply could not deliver this kind of expert insight to you without the support of our partners. Now, I'm pleased to welcome Jennifer Krischer, Vice President for NGA Programs at Maxar, to introduce our moderator. Jen, over to you.
Thank you, John. On behalf of Maxar, I'd like to thank INSA for holding today's discussion. I'm personally very excited to see where this conversation goes and to hear some of the questions from the community. As a longtime partner to both NRO and NGA, Maxar is committed to helping the intelligence community successfully implement its commercial GEOINT strategy to ensure seamless public-private collaboration in space and to bolster our innovation advantage in this new era of great power competition. Now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce the moderator for our fireside chat. Theresa Hitchens is the space and Air Force reporter at Breaking Defense, a former Defense News editor. Theresa has also served as a senior research associate at the University of Maryland's Center for International and Security Studies at Maryland. And she spent 6 years in Switzerland as the director of United Nations Institute for Disarmament Research. Please join me in welcoming Theresa Hitchens.
Thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate the introduction, and I want to say a big thanks to INSA for this opportunity to serve as today's moderator for what I know is going to be an insightful discussion. I am really excited today because we're privileged to be here with two of the key people responsible for determining how the intelligence community does business with commercial providers of geospatial intelligence from space at a time of rapid change in the environment. Commercial companies are racing ahead with innovations that, if harnessed, will allow the US government to expand its ability to understand events in the world, quicken the pace of obtaining imagery and analysis, and crucially, be able to more quickly and more robustly share information with allies and partners. And our panelists today are charged with doing all those things, harnessing the growing capabilities of the private sector for the IC. They probably don't need any introduction for most of you, so I'm just going to keep it really brief. First, we're going to have David Gauthier, who is the Director of Commercial and Business Operations Group in the Source Directorate at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, NGA. He also is currently serving as the first ever chair of the Intelligence Community Commercial Space Acquisition Council, providing strategy and policy recommendations to IC leadership. And Pete Muend is the Director of the National Reconnaissance Office's, NRO, Commercial Systems Program Office, where he leads NRO's strategy for full integration of commercial imagery sources. This includes everything from traditional electro-optical imagery to newer technologies like radio frequency geolocation. To start us off, I'm actually going to ask Dave to catch us up with the new commercial strategy, well, it was issued a year ago or so, that is being developed by the agency to do a bunch of things, but one of them is streamline methods of communications with industry partners. Dave, can you maybe give us a 5-minute elevator pitch on the progress you've made in moving toward what were actually pretty ambitious goals? And maybe you can also talk about the challenges in doing so far.
Sure, thank you, Theresa. The commercial GEOINT strategy for the NSG was published last November, and you can find it on the NGA website if you want to take a look at it. But it really did have 4 pillars. One was to drive unity of effort, and part of that pillar was establishing the expectation that commercial would be a primary source for our mission. And I think we've made progress on that pillar in that we have gone out to the community and established an NSG-wide commercial GEOINT requirements process where we are accepting new requirements for everybody's needs when it comes to imagery collection, but also their needs for analytic services. And so we're capturing those requirements this summer. We gathered up over 500 of them from our community partners, and we are conducting a gap analysis and looking at how we can use some of our resources to actually fund these needs that are new and emerging from the community. The other thing we're doing with those requirements is we're using them to continuously update our statements of capability for things like electro-optical imagery, a new one for SAR imagery that's in work, commercial SAR, and one for commercial analytic services as well, so that we have these well-established, documented requirements going forward. I will say new capabilities always are part technology push and part user pull. And for the most part, we've been pushing these commercial technologies, and the demand and the user adoption has been slow, as expected when something is new. But this really changed in the last year, and I think the crisis in Ukraine had a lot to do with that. So I would say that last year we probably had user demand driving at least $30 or $40 million worth of requirements value for these new services. And I'm happy to say that in our preparations for fiscal year 23, that user demand looks to have tripled. So we really do expect that now that people have been using these, they're more comfortable and expanding their requirements for the future. The second pillar was diversifying sources. I think we've really been able to do that. NRO helped us go from 1 to 3 providers of the EO commercial layer. NRO has got 5 commercial SAR providers on their study contract. Our economic indicators and monitoring contract has 5 primes, but dozens of subcontractors that are supporting that as well. And so, and in terms of diversity, NGA is also recently awarded to 2 foreign companies. So we're using GHGSat for methane mapping and HEO Robotics for some on-orbit characterization services. So these is all, I think, good news in terms of diversifying our supply. The third pillar was improving data security, and I think we've established with the NRO some standard security practices. I'll let Pete talk about that later. And then the fourth pillar was influencing and fostering more commercial capabilities, and we've been working with a number of organizations like AFWorks, DIU, In-Q-Tel, SRI, NASA, Space Force's Front Door organization to really get our hands around what's out in the community and how can we help foster those capabilities for our mission.
Super. Sounds like you have a lot going on. Pete, do you want to chime in here? Dave took some of my thunder mentioning your, your recent EO contracts and the SAR contracts, and just talk to us about what you're doing to integrate and to make use of, to take advantage of the commercial capabilities that are out there, and what kind of maybe your next steps are.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to, Theresa. Thank you. So it's been a very exciting couple months, really. Certainly since the GEOINT symposium, where we did make a couple announcements there. I think there are a number of endeavors that we were able to follow through with in the interim period that I'm glad to talk about. But maybe taking a half a step back first. As many of you know, our office is responsible for the acquisition of commercial space-based remote sensing, and obviously that started with electro-optical, with a long-standing program that originated at NGA. But we've really worked to expand that, not just additional providers on the electro-optical side, but with commercial radar, commercial RF as well. And frankly, we're thrilled with the progress that we're making. Thrilled, for the capabilities that makes available for the intelligence community and Department of Defense, but for the industry base as a whole. We work obviously very, very closely with agencies like NGA, NSA, the rest of the intelligence community, the services, including the Space Force, as well as all the combatant commands to make sure that we really can be responsive to the entirety of their acquisitions and requirements. The two exciting activities that I really want to spend a little bit of time talking about, though, since the last quarter, really are the electro-optical commercial layer award contract. So that's the large set of electro-optical awards that we made, and a strategic commercial enhancements broad agency announcement focus area on commercial RF, which is proceeding as well. So EOCL, or the electro-optical commercial layer, was a really big deal. It's valued. It's a big deal for obviously the U.S. government side as well as the industrial base. It's valued at hundreds of millions of dollars annually, and several billion dollars over the course of an entire decade. That is a resounding example of our commitment, NRO's commitment, the community's commitment. Certainly, NGA as the GEOINT functional manager as well, to make sure we follow through and really buy what we can and build what we must. So, as we have a set of requirements, and this is the process that we followed under EOCL and the future next generation of national systems as well, as we have a set of requirements, we do take a holistic look at that across the community and to do everything we can to understand where commercial is, commercial will be, and we do our best to allocate to commercial all of those requirements that we possibly can, and look there to meet those needs that they can stand up to. Obviously, there are still going to be needs that commercial is not yet able to satisfy or won't be able to satisfy, particularly around sensitivity or classification and those sort of things. And that's certainly okay. So we'll continue to have to build other national systems to meet those more difficult requirements, more challenging requirements, especially as our adversary continues to present more and more difficult challenges for us. So I mentioned the 10-year contracts, though, and that really is an important part as well. There's certainly plenty of opportunity space and options to grow in capacity and have decision points along the way. But that was really meant to do two principal things. So really make sure that we could look to commercial to meet our needs that we are expecting them to satisfy over the longer term, over that period, and that'll certainly grow over time. But it was also meant as a demand signal to industry as well, to make sure that it was clear to the Wall Street, the commercial sector, the capital sector, that really we are serious about leveraging this U.S. industrial base over the long term, and we do expect commercial industry to be able to go out and get the capital that they need to grow their constellations and be able to meet those needs over the long term. So not only we can benefit on the United States side, but the entire United States space sector can as well. So beyond electro-optical commercial layer, the other thing that we're doing is obviously we have a more agile contract approach called to strategic commercial enhancements, and this is something that we've done out of the broad agency announcement construct. We recently awarded a number of radar contracts for that. Those are going very, very well, providing a lot of data to the user community, helping drive what Dave mentioned in terms of a formal statement of capabilities as we look through and really establish a formal government need over the long term. But are providing lots and lots of data for an incredible amount of mission even as we speak. So we're moving forward, building on our longstanding contract that we've had for a couple of years with one of the radar or remote radio frequency providers, and really looking to do the same as we did with radar, but open the umbrella a little bit more, understand where the RF industry is, and what we can take advantage of, award multiple contracts. That RFP is on the street. We do have proposals, and we're eagerly looking forward to concluding that source selection and awarding multiple awards in all likelihood as soon as next month. So we can, obviously be able to understand where the commercial radio frequency capabilities are, understand and help that inform operational capabilities and eventually requirements in the long term. And of course, just provide data to support ongoing mission on a day-to-day basis, as we have been with our current providers. So all in all, we're really happy with the providers that we have on contract. Really helping move the state of the industry forward. Our ability to leverage that as well as part of a larger hybrid architecture. Working right alongside our other national systems. And at least on the commercial side, Dave alluded to, and you did as well, Theresa. We have 3 large commercial imagery acquisition contracts, 5 radar contracts underway, doing an incredible amount for us. And an HSI contract, a hyperspectral contract, an RF contract, and are eagerly looking forward to additional RF contracts to move that part even further forward.
Awesome. Also doing a lot of work. For those of us who are not, the cognoscenti here, can you explain what a statement of capabilities means? What does that mean?
Dave, would you like to take the first one as the functional manager side?
Somebody can take a hit at it.
Sure. So this is part of the intelligence community's, requirements process. To gather formal requirements, the functional managers do that across their constituencies, and then they validate those requirements through a process of, consolidation and coordination with all of the member agencies. Those requirements get documented in terms of ways that they can go out and be satisfied by either building collection systems, buying commercial capabilities, or adopting and using commercial systems as well. So, but once you have that standard set of requirements, they get documented in a statement of capabilities approved by the DNI. A government cost estimate is created, and budget wedges are laid in to the program so that they can be funded and awarded. And so once we have a statement of capabilities like that, it really helps, I would say, preserve budget into the future so that we can buy those capabilities for the nation. And then it also serves as the set of requirements that we would go to an acquisition program office and say, here's what you need to deliver against in order to meet the nation's needs. So for electro-optical, we've had a statement of capabilities for that. And there's a commercial layer that was negotiated and designed and acquired by the NRO CSPO. And we intend to do the same thing with commercial radar imaging and with commercial analytic services and probably on down the line.
So Pete, the study contracts then that you are doing over at NRO are kind of helping feed those the requirements development, essentially. Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, very, very directly. That's a great point. Obviously, the study contracts and the contracts that we do have, they do have a number of intentions and purposes. One of them is just to provide data. For those companies that actually have satellites on orbit, we can order collection and then provide data, to the rest of the community, working through NSA or NGA or whomever to funnel that to where it's needed, working actually with our allies and partners as well. And I'm sure we'll spend some time talking about that aspect. Yeah. But another part of that is we get a tremendous amount of modeling and simulation data and measured performance data as well that we can use and NGA uses and the community uses for mission utility studies to help bolster and justify one of the aspects of creating those SOCs and formal requirements. I also want to add to what Dave said and really amplify that. From our perspective, a statement of capabilities, which obviously goes through the intelligence community process. It also goes through the Department of Defense process. So it goes through the JROC, it gets endorsed through that. And from our perspective, that really is what the Department of Defense and intelligence community have said. Here are the formal requirements that we're going to stand behind over the long term. And as Dave alluded to, there's a budget associated with that to make sure that we actually can and ensure ourselves that we can provide and meet those capabilities that are requested over the long term, that the community is willing and able to stand behind.
Great.
Obviously, we have other efforts adjacent to that, that look at some of the other emerging phenomenologies and other things. But from a formal, real program of record standpoint, the SOC is an important part of that.
Cool. That's actually really interesting because, from the outside, process is often really opaque. You don't really know what goes on behind the curtains there. I don't know whether you can do this, you might not be able to, but can both of you give the audience some kind of breadbasket understanding of how much of the data that you use for your own missions is commercial, vice how much is you know, from government sources and sensors and stuff? I don't know if you are allowed or if you can. I mean, but if you can't, let me know. If you can, let us know. Pete, you want to go first?
Sure, I'll start. You know, of course, that answer is no. We can't go into details exactly how much is you know, commercial is part of the larger architecture. But I do want to emphasize it is part of a larger hybrid architecture, right? And it is certainly intended to be. You know, there are a lot of parts that go into making that operationally effective. A big part of that is work that we have ongoing in the ground. But I do want to emphasize, you know, our commercial contracts and, you know, certainly on the electro-optical side, but increasingly so with radar and RF, they provide a really material amount of data and imagery and GEOINT and other remote sensing sources of data into the larger enterprise. For example, on average, our commercial imagery providers deliver over 75,000 images every single week into the enterprise. You know, obviously, that serves a lot of different purposes. NGA, you know, is kind of our direct customer for that, articulating those needs on behalf of the larger community. A lot of use cases and a lot of downstream users for that as well. But it is, you know, as I said, a very, very significant amount of imagery. The ground, as I said, though, is a really big part of actually making that useful, though, because it's one thing to have in place, you know, contracts to get the data and order the data, but actually making it work as part of a larger hybrid enterprise is a key part. So that means making sure that we can really use and leverage all the other sources of data that we have access to, all the information streams from our national systems, to work really in combination to make sure we can provide the best total value that we can, providing the insight and intelligence that we need. So the ground is a big part of that, and we spend a lot of time and a lot of energy working through to make sure that the ground architecture can seamlessly plug in multiple commercial providers at scale, moving beyond you know, I'll say historic stovepipes, and really do that. And we're seeing some really good successes, even, you know, over these past couple of weeks, moving that ball forward, certainly with EO, and eventually with radar and other phenomenologies as well.
Dave, do you just want to, I mean, suffice to say, I'm assuming from what you've said and what we've seen, that commercial is growing anyway for both of you as a source, right? Or as a part of your data streams. Do you just want to talk a little bit about that, Dave? Can you just say, I mean, I don't know. And Pete talked about integrating it into the ground. And so maybe you can kind of pivot to the fact that I know you guys have a data strategy, relatively new too. So there are challenges in integrating the commercial stuff, whether it's analysis or data or whatever, into the models, the processes, the ground systems, et cetera, and doing so in a verifiable and, you know, in a safe way, I guess is what I want to say. So can you talk a little bit maybe about that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So, you know, while we can't go into exact numbers, the amount of commercial imagery ingested and used by our community is significant. It's in terms of a percentage of the whole. 75,000 images per week is nothing to dismiss, right? That's fantastic. And on a similar side, we're now buying analytic services that represent maybe the automated detections that we could derive from those images. And so those detections are of things like ships in port, RF emanations. There are also detections like aircraft types counted at airfields, and finding new airstrips in the jungle, all kinds of things that can be derived from imagery and other space-based remote sensing, and then automatically extracted and sent to us as database records. So those detections, you know, in the beginning, we were probably, I'm saying 3 years ago when this was just starting, consuming, you know, hundreds per week, but now we're consuming thousands per week. And in the first couple of months of doing aircraft detections in the Russia-Ukraine region, earlier this year, you know, just in 2 months, we ingested over 25,000 detected aircraft. And put those in our databases so we could trend sort of pattern of life and understand indications and warning from that information, which is a significant step forward from just getting the raw imagery and then having an analyst read that out, and then moving to the next stage of analysis, asking what does it mean and what happens next. So we're really impressed with where the industry has gone in terms of their ability to use computer vision and artificial intelligence or machine learning tools to automatically extract and distill those detections from the raw sense data. So that's definitely growing. We did, I think, 2 delivery orders on our economic monitoring contract last year, and we're up to 8 or 9 this year now. So we really are seeing a growth in capacity, then driving a growth in imagery collected, then driving a growth in the amount of algorithms and detections that can be used to derive information for us. And so that's all been beneficial. And then the second part of your question is, how do you then ingest that and present that to users? Because integration is key to operations. So in a sense, we have some formal programs that are very helpful in doing this, especially with commercial imagery. We've been using a Maxar service called Global Enhanced GEOINT Delivery, or GEGD, that provides a web-based image presentation service to users in different applications on the unclassified website all over the world. And so that's definitely how we're able to provide imagery directly to allies in NATO, Ukraine, et cetera, through those services. And so that's been a very good success story. So Pete buys the capacity, we task it, and then we were able to deliver it directly to users through a web browser in pretty good timelines. So that's been useful. And then we are now also starting to feed those detections that we purchase as sort of an automated service directly into databases of record that analysts use to conduct their analysis. So those databases of record, today they're at NGA, and we're working on getting into the DIA databases like MIDB and Mars as well, so that we're directly feeding the larger enterprise with updated information and staying current on the GEOINT around the world.
That's really fascinating, and you kind of anticipated my next question because you mentioned Ukraine, and I wondered, this is a big thing in the news, the IC sharing of ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, information, satellite imagery, all kinds of stuff with basically intel with Ukraine. And I wondered if you guys both could maybe talk a little bit about lessons learned from the Ukraine experience, and particularly with how information is shared with allies and partners. I know this is a crisis situation, but surely there must be lessons for kind of day-to-day future, how things are shared, how things are best shared, and how you best integrate with allies and partners, because it's not just a one-way street, right? It's not just pushing data. Part of your process is pulling data from allies or pulling, imagery or information or whatever from allies and partners as well to try to create holistic pictures, right? So maybe you can both address that. Dave, why don't you start, and then we'll go to Pete, because I know, Pete, in some of the contracts that you're looking at, you have actual, non-US providers of sensor imagery, for example, under a study contract, et cetera. So Dave, you want to talk about that first, since the dissemination is kind of it lies in your lap, so to speak.
Sure. Well, NGA has been contributing to the NATO effort when it comes to providing information in this arena. And so that's where the Fusion Center happens, and all the GEOINT information we can provide goes through that channel in terms of formal channels. But when you buy commercially available information, whether that be imagery or other data or services, that's inherently shareable and unclassified. So we can provide that information in a variety of mechanisms. And so, of course, it all goes through the formal channels, to NATO and is combined with other sources for information purposes, but also some of the commercial data can be disseminated through other web means, like I mentioned, Global EGD, but also companies themselves are able to act of their own accord and provide that information directly to those who need it and their customer bases. And so we've seen almost an unanticipated consequence, but a good thing, and we're learning a lot from it on how we can best coordinate both public and private delivery of information, and at the same time try to limit what may be considered disinformation in the arena as well. And so I think that's where the benefit of having an organization like NGA involved is that we can help coordinate the community's efforts, be they public or private, and then instill in our user base a sense of trust in what they are getting.
Pete, you want to talk about that a little bit, about NROs, what lessons you might have learned from the Ukraine situation and the use of commercial data, which has been pretty impressive in Ukraine.
Yeah, we've certainly seen a lot of that. Obviously we've used commercial data and helpfully because it's unclassified for many years. But I think given the ongoing crisis in Ukraine and the transparency that we all want to see there, I think it's definitely provided some unique benefits. With our electro-optical providers, we've collected, as you might expect, a tremendous amount of imagery over that area, and working with NGA and our allies and partners to make sure it's used every way that it can be. Likewise with commercial radar, collecting there and disseminating that as well, through NGA and with NGA RF as well. While the imagery and the data is always unclassified, though, there are still challenges involved with getting the data to where it needs to be, and certainly we're working through that, and we continue to work through that. We had a lot of pieces in place previously, but it continues to show opportunities for improvement as well. One part of it is making sure that as we receive the data, we can make it available on the security fabric, the classification fabric, where it's needed, because different user sets exist and operate and do their work on different systems at different levels. So we want to make sure that we're as flexible as we can be, getting the data everywhere that we possibly can. Additionally, while the data is unclassified, that doesn't necessarily mean we own the data outright, right? They're all subject to data rights restrictions and end user license agreements. And so through all of our contracts for a while now, we have been putting forward a set of standardized end user license agreements to really simplify and potentially over the longer term automate how we buy that imagery with what intended audience, potentially change license levels if we have to, along the way. But really simplify and hence speed things up potentially in a machine-to-machine environment. So instead of having licenses, they're individually negotiated with a lot of legal help, on a company-by-company basis. Those end up generally being very dense and hard to parse, especially if you're in a wartime situation. I think that simplification definitely helps, and we've structured things that have gone from just a U.S. only national security license all the way up through and including public release. Working very closely with NGA to make sure that we order the data, with its intended user base in mind, and I think we are definitely doing that, and thereby making sure that we can and provide confidence that the data can be shared to whoever it needs to, and we're not buying the data, importantly, more than we have to. Ideally only once, by the U.S. government using it, where we need to.
You mentioned the magic words machine to machine, so I'm gonna ask. Can you talk maybe about how or if you're pursuing artificial intelligence and machine learning to help you do some of those tasks? I mean, there's a lot of data manipulation tasks going on here at very different levels, everything from disseminating but to integrating on the ground to just, trying to make sense of all the incoming stuff, right? Can you talk a little bit about that, Pete? And then we'll flip over to Dave.
Yeah, absolutely. Frankly, I expect Dave will have a lot more to say on this particular topic on the analysis side. But the NRO is and has been using AI and ML, artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms. We produce a tremendous amount of data, intelligence, and a lot of insight, and it is and continues to be a challenge to make sure that we can distill the important bits out of that, and importantly take action at speed, from those data feeds. And so, so we use AI and ML to really enhance all that and make sure we can get to decision ready data that much quicker. So we've done and continue to do things and increasing amounts of things on the multi-int ATR side, automatic target recognition side, computer vision and image processing, modeling. We've been working on automated standardization of data labeling alongside Maven and some NGA efforts as well. And then, of course, we're using AI and ML to help drive visualizations and common operating pictures as well to make sure, the warfighters can make the decisions that they need at the speed they need to. All in all, we're using it to reduce latencies to detect fleeting targets, and those targets and adversaries are just getting more and more challenging, and so we can continue to hold those targets at risk and give the United States a decision advantage. AI and ML are very important components of our larger hybrid architecture, right? This is not just a commercial-centric thing, but they really are used across the entire architecture, which includes both large and small satellites, large constellations, small constellations, and making it all work together and generating mission effect as quickly as we can is an important part of that, and one of the big reasons we use these techniques. But with that, I'm happy to turn it over to Dave.
Yeah, Dave, maybe you can also address the fact that you guys just took over the Pentagon's Project Maven, which I don't know whether to say congratulations or I'm sorry. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that, as well as I know that you, with your data strategy, AI and ML are a big part of that. So maybe you can riff a little bit on that.
Yeah, well, I hope that the story that will be written about Project Maven will be a congratulatory one. So we'll go with that for now. Yeah, like Pete said, AI, ML, computer vision techniques, before that, ATR, automated target recognition, algorithmic warfare. These things have been a part of our plans and research and development efforts for a long time to get after the speed at which we can, understand information and pass it to those who need it. So, I think we're using the latest AI and ML techniques throughout the value chain now. And by that, I mean helping us understand the best tasking opportunities in order to get collection that is necessary or the right information at the right time. And then also when we receive raw sensor data and information in its aggregate form, how do we then both triage that information and present the most important bits to the human analysts, and how do we also then search for the most important targets that might be of interest to our customer base and get those out the door quickly. So there's a lot going on, and I think AI and ML techniques are being used in many different ways. To talk a little bit about Maven, I think maybe the cleanest explanation of the Maven program and the commercial services program would be that Maven is curating our in-house set of AI and machine learning algorithms to work against the data that we own. And the data that we own comes from all systems, national, tactical, academic, but also commercial. If we ingest that commercial data, it's in our holdings. And we will apply the Maven algorithm suite against that information. Commercial services program, where we're buying those services from commercial vendors directly, I think of that as curating the same types of algorithms, but we're curating them in the private enterprise. And that's where they're being created, maintained, used, and it's the intellectual property of a company. And so we're looking for the best of breed algorithms to use in both cases, both the ones that are in-house operations and the ones that are being used in private industry. And what I think is interesting about working with the MAVEN program going forward is we're looking at how we also cross the streams. How can we cross-pollinate the best algorithms that may be curated in the government and pass them to industry for getting better solutions to us? And then how do we curate the best algorithms in industry and buy that intellectual property and bring it into the government so that we can use it against our data holdings? So I think to date, we have 2 clean, separate programs operating in their lanes, and we're talking about that cross-pollination going forward, which makes me really excited about NGA owning the MAVEN program starting on 1 October. So I'm excited for that, and it addresses what our NGA director is now calling deluge control, right? The art of translating too much data into a warfighting advantage. And that's really why we need programs like this and the AI and ML techniques that we can harness.
Okay. That's really, really fascinating. We'll have to keep up with you as you go forward with Project MAVEN. So you guys both mentioned automatic target recognition, which kind of threw my mind somewhere else. And that's over to the issue of tactical ISR, which seems to be in a bit of a flux, I guess, with regard to the responsibilities of the IC agencies, your agencies, and the responsibility of the Space Force. Now, the Space Force is, up and operating, and the Space Force has made it clear, General Raymond and top officials, that they believe they have a role to play in providing military commanders with rapid turnaround ISR, which they call tactical ISR, battlefield ISR, so those commanders can make faster decisions about things like long-range fires and automatic targeting and this sort of stuff in a informationalized, if you will, battlefield structure that the Pentagon is looking at as the future way of war. So the GAO, as I understand it, in July, issued a classified review of just this question of like the responsibilities and how that works and how it should work and kind of some recommendations. Obviously, it's classified. I haven't seen it, but they are about to release an unclassified version here in like the next week. And I wondered if you guys, and this includes responsibility for obtaining tactical ISR from commercial providers, which, kind of all 3, U2 and Space Force is now talking about doing as well. So have you guys had a chance to review the classified version of the report? I'm not asking you to reveal anything, but maybe you can address like how you, it's going to be unclassified, so there are recommendations. Maybe you guys can address a little bit this issue and kind of some thoughts about it, and maybe how you might implement the GAO's recommendations over the next year or so. Yeah, Dave, I'm going to start with you because you chair the IC's Commercial Space Council, and I would assume that's one place where this issue is being discussed.
Yeah, happy to start on this one. I've seen the GAO report, and I don't think there's anything groundbreaking or that you would find from that. From my recollection, the biggest recommendation is about clearly defining roles and responsibilities going forward, and that's something we all know needs to be done. And we have a new military service, and we have a new National Space Intelligence Center. They're a member of the intelligence community. How do we all make this work together? Given that NRO and NGA have been doing commercial ISR for decades. So I do think we are operating under guidelines today that we will not duplicate what anybody else is doing. So Space Force has said they won't duplicate what already exists. They are doing gap analysis to see if they have unique new mission requirements that are not accounted for in today's construct. And if that's the case, I think it opens a negotiation of, how do we now go solve those requirements? Is it something that a functional manager does and NRO procures, or is it something we say, those are uniquely DoD things, and we have never done anything like that. Why don't you go solve that independently. But I think that's a completely open negotiation that will be forthcoming from the GAO report and the gap analysis. And we're happy to participate in that. I do believe there are new service requirements for space domain and protecting and defending that domain. I'm happy to be going out to LA first week of September to visit with Space Systems Command and talk to them about their acquisitions versus our acquisitions and how we work together. And my team also met with their commercial front door program just this week. So I think we're integrating pretty well in that we're having the working level conversations on a daily basis with Space Force. And what remains to be seen is sort of how the formal guidance comes down from above. I don't want to take all of Pete's thunder because I know he has a lot to say.
No, Pete, go. Because you guys are, providing a lot of that. I mean, you have been traditionally providing that information. And now I will, not going to throw you under the bus or anything, but commanders in the field, the combatant commands are always like, no, we don't get it fast enough. We don't have enough. Nobody's paying attention to us. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about that, what NRO has traditionally done and how you see this going forward. And the sharing of the responsibilities, where there might be lines. I mean, I'm a firm believer in people staying in their lanes in government, because if you get too committee crazy, things just don't go well.
So I think how I'd like to start is by dovetailing with one of the things that you mentioned, Theresa, in that we've been talking about how does commercial support tactical ISR, and I think that brings up a great point. I don't think, and I think as an agency, we've been pretty clear that there really is a material difference between commercial ISR, or I'm sorry, between tactical ISR or strategic ISR. It's just ISR. It's, taking pictures from space, and it all depends on, the latency and characteristics of that imagery or data set and where it's used and how it's used. Multiple platforms, multiple systems, be them government systems or commercial systems, can be used to support any number of those things. And so we continue to stand by and work with all of our partners to meet the requirements that are allocated to us, formally speaking. Dave mentioned, protect and defend, and some of the ongoing discussions there. As many of you know, the NRO and Space Command and Space Force established a protect and defend strategic framework a number of years ago, and that really formalized end-to-end operations between Department of Defense and intelligence community, really going from operations all the way to acquisition as well. Talks about crisis planning procedures and improving communications, and really established an unprecedented level of collaboration on space security matters. One of the additional things that we're now talking about with Space Command in particular is kind of extending that protect and defend thought process. And really considering, from a government-wide perspective, what are our limitations, importantly, and potential obligations in terms of considering commercial as part of that larger enterprise. How far does that go? Especially, for example, just thinking about it from a freedom of navigation standpoint, but up in space, perhaps. So all discussions that are currently ongoing, and that certainly will be a whole of government set of considerations. Especially given some of the formal obligations that we've signed contracts against, right? And that serves as a good backdrop against that. But working closely with the Space Force, there's a lot of collaboration. There has been for generations. The NRO, as an organization, was created as a joint venture between the Department of Defense and Central Intelligence Agency, and Space Force. Continues to make up a very significant percentage of our workforce, and we meet all the needs that that are allocated to us against that mission, which includes strategic, tactical, and other requirements. And we will certainly continue to do that hand in hand with the Space Force and a lot of other parties. Just one kind of maybe more specific anecdote about how we support those things, kind of commercial centric in our office. One of the things that we've really worked to operationalize over the last few years is direct downlink from our commercial systems, and so over the past several years we've been working and supporting maybe on average 3 military exercises a week, Project Convergence, other things, and really working with our commercial providers, but to be able to do collections and then turn around downlinks in a really expedient manner down to tactical Army and Navy user terminals that can provide that data into the hands of the warfighter decision makers that most assuredly are thinking and operating at a tactical level. So I think that's just a great demonstration of the work we continue to do better at, hand in hand with our commercial partners, right? Because they're a very big part of this, and working with the combatant commands in particular to make sure we can help them meet their mission.
So we don't have a whole lot of time left, so I just wanted to throw out a question from the audience that popped up. How can small businesses and non-traditional providers get involved in providing commercial capabilities and data to both your organizations? Dave, you want to go first, and then Pete, you can go second. Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely have an active market research and discovery function where we're seeking new businesses, small businesses that might be in the business of providing analytic services or new capabilities to us to meet our mission needs and provide value. So I think when it comes to analytic services, the barriers to entry for starting a company like that are lower now than they've ever been. You have plenty of data providers who will sell you data, plenty of cloud service providers who will give you compute. You got modeling and algorithms and data scientists who will do something with it. And the biggest barrier to entry now is talking to the government. So our organization is really focused on trying to remove that last barrier so that we can get the best ideas that are coming from small companies and startups into the arena. And we started a few years ago with a concept of walking a path with some of these companies to help them cross the valley of death, so to speak, in that they may have a demonstrated capability, but they don't know how to get it in front of government users, don't know how to get into the government acquisition and contracting space. And so we created a defined path where we do help companies do that, and we call it the mountain. And if you'll forgive me, I'll actually hold up a picture of it right here. So this is the mountain that you've got to climb to get from a new capability, all the way up to an operational contract.
Better be fit.
Right. And the funny story there is initially our graphics people at NGA wanted it to be sailing around a Caribbean island instead of climbing a mountain, because they said we shouldn't advertise that working with us is hard. And my response was, we should be authentic, and we shouldn't try to convince anyone that it's smooth sailing to work with the government for the first time. So we won with the difficult mountain, but companies have been able to climb the mountain, establish contracts with us and maintain them. And I think that is a great opportunity, and we really encourage doing that. And so we are operating sort of that pipeline to help cross the valley of death. And then working with Pete, the strategic enhancements BAA has been another way for smaller companies to come in with new capabilities. So I don't want to steal his thunder on that, but I think we're doing much better than maybe we have in the past.
Pete, you want to talk about that? Because I know that has been one of the big goals of the BAA and the BAA processes, was to be able to, as they say in the NRO, open the aperture, right? To bring in some of these newbies, right?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. We established the strategic commercial enhancements BAAs with a very deliberately low barrier to entry. And there are a lot of things that go into that, from a contracting, security standpoint as well. But more importantly, from a scope standpoint, we were open to and did award contracts that with companies that didn't even have satellites in orbit yet, right? But certainly we're headed in that direction as owner operators. The ones that we wanted to and saw providing value over the long term. But we were able to award those contracts relatively early. But we also created those contracts very deliberately so they could ramp up very, very quickly. And so when those companies were actually able to provide data, get kind of beyond the modeling and simulation side of things, we were able to leverage that, not only to verify their modeling and simulation assertions and make sure, yeah, they were delivering and able to deliver the sort of data at the timeline that they said they were able to, but also just provide mission value against real world requirements and needs. And that's exactly what we saw with some of our radar contracts. They were able to expand very, very quickly to provide really material support to an ongoing mission right alongside NGA. And so we're very, very happy with how that's progressed. That's a model that really originated on the electro-optical side. Obviously helping inform the large EOCL procurements as well. But we've replicated that on the radar side and on the RF side. As I mentioned, that's ongoing, and we're looking forward to multiple awards there. Again, not necessarily even starting with satellites in orbit, but being able to quickly scale and provide value where they can. And then actually later this year, we would like to take a look at the hyperspectral side of things, and so we intend to issue another strategic commercial enhancements BAA focused on hyperspectral imagery providers, and we're eagerly looking forward to leveraging a wider gamut of those providers. But that's just what we're doing. I do want to emphasize, there's a lot going on at the NRO besides just commercial remote sensing. We do have obviously the Director's Innovation Initiative. We spent a lot of time talking about that as a way to quickly on-ramp a lot of technologies. Since '98, I think we've fielded 6,000 proposals from 44 states across the union, and funded 25% of those as a way to really ingest new technologies and to not just the commercial remote sensing side, right, but across all the capabilities that NRO brings to bear. We've also stood up an unclassified collaboration environment along with our AS&T, so our Advanced Systems and Technology group, along with the Air Force Office of Scientific Research and Virginia Tech Applied Research Corporation. So it's an unclassified collaboration environment that's getting a lot of great utility, looking at things in a more open environment. And then we have a number of programs where we can actually get flight experience with some emerging programs and really get some flight heritage for some of those potential technologies under our belt quickly. So a lot of exciting opportunities, and we love working with those sort of providers as they have and bring new ideas to bear.
Well, thank you both. I see our time is up, and I'm going to turn the forum back over to John to bring us home. Can't hear you. We can't hear you, John. You're muted.
I think you're muted, John.
There we go. I'm agreeing now. Okay. Dave, Pete, Theresa, thank you. That was terrific. Thanks for having such an informative and candid discussion of the issues. And Dave, I'm sure we're going to get requests for that mountain graphic, so you need to send us a copy. And for everyone watching online, thank you for joining us this afternoon. And of course, we want to thank our sponsors, BAE Systems, Maxar, Sim Software, and Ventel. And finally, we hope you join us at some of our upcoming INSA events. In September, we'll hold the final installment of INSA's Foundations Future of the IC Workforce webinar series. Underwritten by Avantis, Mission Integration takes place on Tuesday afternoon, September 6th from 2 to 3. Our speakers are Nick Adams with the Senate and Select Committee on Intelligence staff, Mitran Natarajan, Deputy Director of CISA, Kirsten Wood, CEO of the Gristmill Exchange, and the program will be moderated by Lindy Kaiser of clearancejobs.com. And they're going to be talking about requirements and the current state of mission integration in such areas as cybersecurity, cyber attacks, and gray zone threats. On September the 8th, we'll host Gil Herrera, who's Director of Research at NSA, for a coffee and conversation to discuss NSA's research priorities, the outlook for high performance computing, more on AI, ML, quantum encryption, and other topics. On September the 15th and the 16th, we hope you'll come join us in person at the Intelligence and National Security Summit, which is over at the Gaylord Convention Center at National Harbor. We do this each year in partnership with AFCEA, and this year's program will touch on a number of hot button issues, including Chinese threats to the US supply chain, public data and its impact on analysis within the IC, Russia, Ukraine, midterm election security, and more. And finally, last week, we opened nominations for our 2023 Achievement Awards, which recognize outstanding early to mid-career professionals in the intelligence, homeland, and national security community. These awards are an excellent opportunity to honor the rising stars within your organization, as well as a leader who helps mentor and advance a diverse, talented workforce. You'll find the full lineup of our events on our website, insaonline.org. And also when the webinar ends, you'll see a short survey pop up on your screen. Please take a minute to answer the questions. We always value your feedback. This concludes today's program. Stay safe and healthy and have a wonderful afternoon.